Hi, I'm Ron V. You're watching Forbidden Planet TV, and we're here today to discuss Detective Comics' Gotham Nocturne.
Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. Here is Ram V. How are you, mate?
Hello, hello. Yeah, I'm doing all right, thank you.
Excellent. Calm and relaxed in your t-shirt.
Yes, yes. My office can get a bit warm. Yeah.
I know that feeling as well. Yeah, I get a lot of blazing light in here too,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm committed to keeping the jacket on though, which sometimes means when I'm recording these, I've finished them. I'm just absolutely bathed in sweat. So you were on recently talking about your new DC book, The Vigil, and
Yeah.
your new Boom project, Rare Flavors, both of which Vigil is out now, Rare Flavors will be out soon, both of which are tremendously exciting. But this is a return to us discussing the epic work you're doing in on like the Western DC Comics character, Batman. So this is your overarching Gotham Nocturne storyline.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're talking about the hardcover collection of the first arc, Overture.
Yeah.
How do you feel about how that has turned out, Ram?
I mean, we're just about halfway through,
Yeah,
so I feel good. I feel like there are a lot of. This is probably the most ambitious long form storytelling I've done in on a big two character. Um, and to anyone who read my very first creator owned book at Image called Paradiso, they will see the similarities in that. I love just building a situation and building a world with the first sort of, I don't know, third of a story. Um, Often everything feels like setup, and everything feels like, my God, there are a million threads. How could this possibly come together? And then, back third of the book, you'll start seeing all the threads come together, and there's just such a joy in seeing things that you thought were throwaway moments kind of become centrally important to the narrative later on. So that's where things are in my brain now. I've kind of set the board, if you will. And as at the time of talking, we're about, I think, 1073 is where we
yeah.
are. So we're about 10 issues in, and the board is now set. The next 10 issues will clearly expand upon the conflict and Batman's journey through it. And then the last 10 issues will be about, can he or can't he, will he or won't he?
Essentially, have you more or less had it's essentially a 3 year arc of Detective Comics? That's what the entire tale will
Yeah,
be.
just about 30 issues is what
Yeah,
is the length that I had in mind
yeah,
when I first pitched this. And yeah, so far it is all going to plan.
yeah. I mean the Overture, the story in the first collection, is wonderful. You're working with. Can you talk a bit about your art team on the book?
Yeah, I'm working with originally launched with Rafael Albuquerque. And then Ivan Reese has been kind of the has done majority of the work on the issues so far. And there'll be other artists coming on board as we go forward. Very excited about working on the next arc, and the next artist I'm working with as well. So will be announced in due time. But I think the one common thread through all of these artists is they have this kind of wonderfully poetic, dark take on Batman, in that they see him as this kind of almost Byronic,
Yeah.
operatic, gothic character, rather than the utility belt and super soldier and big stompy boots kind of Batman, which I really love, and I think that fits the tone of this story really well.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about Batman as a concept is he's actually highly elastic, because it's actually a very simple core to that character.
Yeah,
His origin story is very, very straightforward, really, but that you can lean into different aspects of the mythos. But for me, the operatic nature of Batman
Yeah,
is something that has been the Phantom of the Opera of it all has been
yeah,
somewhat underutilized, and you've kind of plugged hot wide straight into that with your run.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was pitched entirely as that. It was pitched as, I don't think there has been enough done with this take
Yeah,
on Batman, and I don't think there have been enough narratives that looked into the tragic nature of the character. I mean, everyone always goes back to the, oh, his parents were killed, the pearls spilling on the, but surely, some 40 years on, surely the man has moved on from that, and yet
yeah,
he is every bit as tragic. So um why is that? And I think investigating not just the origin, but the ethos of the character is quite interesting. Certainly in reflection of everything that has gone on in the other books. He almost got married to
yeah.
Catwoman, and then she told him he couldn't be happy. Um, Batman wouldn't let him be happy. Batman needs his darkness, if you will. And I think there are lots of interesting things to be done with those conversations. That conversation in itself, if you took it as a point of exploration, you could write a whole story around it. So yeah, I'm having a blast sort of digging into that aspect of the character.
For those who haven't approached the book yet and are considering picking up the collection of the first arc, can you give them a bit of an introduction as to where your tale begins?
Yeah, we the Batman in this story is altogether human, and is at the cusp of that age, that part of his life where he's beginning to wonder if the physical and mental stresses of being who he is will begin to play a part in his endeavor to rid Gotham of crime. Um, and those stresses start showing up as inner demons, in this case personified by that well-known Batman villain Barbatos, the Bat God, if you will. And while all of this is going on, there is a new sort of gazillionaire family coming into town. They're called the Orghams, and they might be, some say, the original family that established Gotham, and that the name Arkham itself is only a disambiguation of the original name Orgham. And this family has been around for much longer than most people could think of or imagine. Uh, Ra's al Ghul, before he was the leader of the Great League of Assassins, was one of their doyens, one of their trainees, if you will. And so their history and their background story kind of has far-reaching implications for Gotham as well. And so this new family has come into town, and they have come into town with the noble intentions of saving Gotham. But saving it from itself, or saving it from the influence of this mad caped crusader running through town, is something we will have to see.
Brilliant, mate. Fantastic. Can you remember when you were what your first exposure to Batman was?
Yeah, it was the Batman animated series, really. That was the first sort of sustained uh, um, exposure to Batman that I had. I'd come back from school, and it would be perfect time to turn on the TV, and the animated series would show up. Of course, Bruce Timm, Kevin Conroy voicing Batman. Things
Yeah.
don't get much better.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm as a lifelong Batman fan, the beauty of that show, when that show first appeared in the '90s, what became rapidly apparent was, compared to the comics that were being published at the time, actually the ultimate expression and the purest expression and most successful expression of Batman, of what Batman is and was the animated show.
Sure.
And time after time, those episodes that they created, that they
But they also created a contemporary aesthetic. Like
yes,
if you think about it, I mean, not to lampoon the comics at all, but Batman's most enduring aesthetics have both been created outside of the medium. First by Tim Burton on the Michael Keaton Batman film,
Yeah.
and then by Paul Dini, Bruce Timm on the animated show.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more. And then you have episodes, say like the original Mr. Freeze episode, where
Heart
they
of
gave the
Ice.
character, it's so wonderful,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
And gave the character an origin he'd never had, and not
yeah,
only an origin he'd never had, but a beautiful origin.
yeah. And to be honest, like, I didn't even know there was a different origin. That was the origin for
Yeah,
me, and I love that character. Like, Freeze is probably my favorite Batman villain, which is why he's in this book.
yeah, right on.
And yeah, and there was a line in the first few issues that everyone latched onto, which really is probably the culmination of my thoughts and ideas on Freeze and why Freeze and Batman make such great antagonists. I mean, sort of antithesis of each other, because for something to be opposite, it also has to be similar in some way, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And that's what I felt. So when in this story, when Freeze sees Batman, he actually helps him, and Batman asks him, like, "Why are you helping me?" And he says, "Look at me." Of course, this is post everything that has happened in the comics with his origin. He says, "Look at me. I pined after this woman. I kept her in deep freeze, trying to cure her of things that I did. And then when she was cured, she walked out and she said, 'I don't need you anymore, and you're obsessed with me.' And she walked away. And he's just gone back to making ice sculptures of her in his hideout, so he can preserve the idea, the image of her that he has in his head. And he looks at Batman, he says, "You're just the same, in that Gotham has moved on from you over the 40 years, and yet somewhere deep down you still have this image of Gotham as this wonderful innocent place where it might have been safe one day for fathers and children to walk about in the dark alleys, and you're trying to bring back that image of Gotham." And he says, "Gotham is your Nora, isn't she?" And I thought that was really the thesis of my understanding of Freeze and Batman in that line.
I completely agree. I completely agree about that. I think it's an amazing thing to be able to create something where previously there was a void, and have that to become,
Yeah,
that's for Freeze. They did it with Two Face as well. Their take on Two Face is now the way that Two Face
yeah,
is
yeah,
is universally understood. You touched upon Kevin Conroy, of course, which I think the amazing thing about his performance, it's truly an amazing vocal performance as Batman, is that I grew up for many years like reading Batman comics when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s before that show existed. And like we all do, I had my voice in my head for what Batman sounds like. Except nowadays, what Batman sounds like is Kevin Conroy. That's how
yeah. I
perfect
cannot think of a
it.
different
No,
voice. Yeah,
I mean
for that.
it's so perfect. His
and and
performance was
and also, like, has created this insurmountable problem for the films, because no matter how amazing you make him look in terms of costume, Batmobile, all of that, the moment that Batman speaks, somewhere in your head you're always like, "Ah, now the animated one sounded much more intimidating than this."
100% without ever going down the route of being kind of bestial, like
Yeah, yeah.
like I mean I think
No, there was in fact such a softness to his voice.
yes,
And
absolutely.
I think the terrifying thing would be that he would, take out 20 henchmen and hold the villain, pull him up by his collar, and again speak with the same sort of quiet assuredness that he would speak with if he was, drinking coffee on his balcony. So
100%. And there's almost interesting, given your take, there's almost like a kind of operatic vibration in his voice.
yeah,
It's kind of
yeah,
similar to hearing the bass tones in an organ in a cathedral.
yeah,
Where he's
absolutely.
not shouting, but he's the
But
level of
he will shake
vibration.
you to your
Yeah,
core.
absolutely right. Yeah, no, it's just a complete character defining performance. We're so lucky that he got to play. I mean, such a tragedy he's no longer with us, but so lucky that he got to play that voice in so many different ways in so many different places for
Yeah, and
30 years.
the other thing that animated show with Kevin Conroy did, which I think is very central to the way I write Batman, is that he's always understated. He never he never makes a big deal out of anything. So very specifically in the most recent issue, Batman is going through the abandoned underground network under Gotham, and he is dismantling the organ superstructures that have been built underneath, and he's going through their guards, and we hear a radio voice say like, "Oh, Batman!" Like Oracle is speaking on the network, and she said, "Oh, Batman is probably drawing all the attention in the tunnels," and we open to this splash page of just some 20-30 guards that are hanging upside down from the ceiling, passed out, smashed against the wall. And Batman is just very quietly walking through this tunnel. And he says, "A little bit of resistance. I should be there shortly."
Just wonderful. What a great energy to impart into your series as well. I think that is a perfect marriage mate. Very, yeah, such a lovely way to. I couldn't think of a better way, to be honest, to encounter Batman in the first instance in that pure distilled cartoon series. Such a great way to, and to have
Yeah,
that
I mean,
be the
I
foundation
read
of your memory.
comics after. In fact, probably my next most memorable appearance of Batman was in Sandman, where he shows up for a couple of issues. And I was like, okay, probably I should go read some Batman stories. And then I just only discovered, you know, Frank Miller stuff and Tim Sale and Denny O'Neil, all of that much, much later. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the sales stuff is wonderful, and
Yeah. Yeah, really it
and
is.
the Denny O'Neil stuff was important to me because my first exposure was the '60s TV show, which
Yeah.
I loved and still love. And I guess when we were talking about the elasticity of Batman as a concept, I grew up in a world where hardcore Batman fans were embarrassed by that show and wanted massively to lean into Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams and the recreation of the Batman as a gothic figure,
Right.
all of which is great. But actually, I've always loved the TV show and continued to
Yeah.
do so.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that nowadays, of course, it all exists in one glorious continuum where
Yeah. And
you
you
can
know,
love Adam West.
we've got Lego Batman, which is probably the second best take.
Yeah, absolutely right. Oh yeah, that's another wonderful performance. Very different. That's a great
Yeah.
performance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I guess this
But
is
I mean, that's the beauty of comics, right? Why are you working in comics if you can't laugh at yourself?
yeah, absolutely right. The clue is in the title, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's I couldn't agree more. And I think it must be great for you to have had that like wonderful experience as a fan of the animated series, and then to be given the trust from DC to have like essentially a 3-year run within the core Batman book, the original founding Batman book, Detective Comics. You know, right there at source. That must be a wonderful journey to be on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's very unusual to have that trust to do a long story arc on a book. But I also think that this is the book that you get to do it on. This is the book because Detective isn't going anywhere. Detective is going to be around for years and years, long after I've stopped writing comics as well. And so if ever there was a book to say, I need you to be patient, I'm going to do a 30-issue story, this was the book. And I'm very excited about how it all comes together. I also believe that any story with kind of weight and gravity should have philosophical consequences, at least for the characters involved. And so by the time we get to the end of the story, we will have seen that Batman has changed somehow, in some interesting way. And I think to be able to do that in a story with a character that is so iconic is very exciting.
Very, very well said, brother. I'm with you all the way, and I can't wait to see how it's going to turn out. And for anybody who's been excited and intrigued by the conversation we've just had, you can order the first hardcover collection of Gotham Nocturne, which is Overture, from the links attached to the conversation. And you can also order the ongoing detective issues because, as Ram said, he's about a third of the way through his overarching story. And as a long-time Batman fan, I'm here to tell everybody watching that it's great stuff and exciting for all the reasons we've just been discussing. Mate, it's always wonderful to see you.
Pleasure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and you're always welcome, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon, Ram. Take
Yep.
care.
Same here.
Cheers, mate. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.